again, and welcome back to a new year and a new edition of the Wiccan Conservative. I hope that everybody had a very happy and safe holiday season. I hope that you got some chances to get out of your house and interact with your family a little bit. But now is time to start a new year. We have a brand new government coming into session. We have a lot of material to cover regarding the events yesterday. And without further ado, let's go ahead and just start talking about what happened and how did we wake up this morning with all these new people in place, and how did we get from point A to point B. If you remember the last time that I spoke with you guys, it was just after the November elections, and there was much confusion about the voting systems, laws and regulations in regards to voting, and some issues with ballots and who was actually out voting. And we were kind of led to believe that there were certain inconsistencies that could be very easily proven, very easily handled, and that we needed to wait for more information to come out, and we needed to pay attention to certain things that were happening in our local districts and do some research on our own to get to the bottom of exactly what was being challenged after the election process. So we had Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, Lin Wood, and there was a couple other lawyers on the Trump team, if you will. We know that Sidney Powell was not necessarily a part of Trump's legal team, but they were encompassing her as such in the media. So to keep it simple, we'll say these people were the Trump team who were getting to the bottom of how the elections were conducted in the states. So I kind of put you guys on hold and gave you little bits and pieces of information regarding what was happening when it came down to challenging the elections in the states. So the last video that I posted for you guys of substance, I hope you enjoyed my New Year's Eve video. That was just kind of a funny poke at the situation to lighten us up, to get prepared for the events that were to follow. But regardless, so the last video that I posted for you, we had an opportunity to actually sit down and read, the legislation inconsistencies in, I believe it was the state of Georgia and the state of Michigan, and I may have threw the state of Pennsylvania in there as well. These were the biggest lawsuits, I thought, that held the most merit, even though many of the states, I believe all 7 swing states, actually had the same argument and contestation to their votes and why they didn't want to send the certain slate of electors, and why a few states even tried to do dueling electors after the fact. If you had the chance to actually go into those court documents, you would have seen some, in my opinion, some very disturbing information in these lawsuits. Now, I said in the past, and I'll say it again, I do not believe that there is foreign interference in American elections. I don't believe that any foreign country needs to manipulate our votes, because they already have the access to the congressmen or state officials or federal officials that they need to be in contact with. They already have those contacts. So I think that a lot of interference happens here on the home front. And as you guys know, I do work the polls here in my local community, in my county, and we had the special election runoff here in Georgia. And I got to speak with, not only people who have done this for years prior to my coming into the mix, so to speak, but I also got a chance to be very intimate with the equipment, understand on a personal level what is actually happening in each stage of the operation, And I also had a chance to go through the training processes to listen to what the Board of Elections was communicating downward to the people who are actually going out and making these elections happen. So when we compare and contrast some things that came up in the lawsuits in regards to the Dominion machines and access to foreign entities, getting that information and playing around with data, we heard a lot of accusations that these machines were hooked up to the internet and that they were storing ballots in remote locations, and the data was just very accessible and very vulnerable. It was not protected very well, and that was a big concern of people here in Georgia. Now, in my personal experience, I can tell you that I don't see any internet capabilities on the BMD pads, the actual physical computers that Georgians voted on, nor in the scanner boxes that you feed the paper ballots into. In Georgia, we have a two-step process. You go to the computer screen, you make your selections, you print out a sheet of paper, and then once you get that piece of paper, you take it to a second station. It's a ballot collection box. You put the piece of paper into the scanner, it scans and tabulates the vote off the QR code onto a memory stick, and locks your paper ballot inside the machine. So those two areas of the voting aspect do not have local access to the internet. So whenever I come in, that was my job, to set up the machines. When I came in the mornings to set up the machines, there was no hooking it up to the internet, making sure that it was working properly, communication signals, nothing like that. It was a simple plug in and turn on sort of process. But what I will say to you that disturbed me just a little bit is when you're opening those machines, it's very important that you start the day with a zero tally so that you know that no ballots have been cast prior to you opening the polls, and you don't want to throw your counts off for the day. But when you open those machines, they also have a lifetime counter on them. So, it didn't dawn on me prior to all the legislative hearings here in Georgia. But at the end of the night on January 5th, I was speaking with my poll manager, and I asked her, I said, how much more information is stored on these machines if we have a lifetime counter of how many votes were actually taken on each machine? And she kind of looked at me and said, I don't know, there shouldn't be any information on those machines. And I said, yeah. I said, I completely understand that, and I wouldn't otherwise think that there would be any information stored or potentially backlogged on those computers, except for that lifetime counter that we have. So one of the big debacles in the Georgia accusations was the integrity of the machines, and what the access was, and if we were allowed to do forensic audits on the machine. Could we pull up electronic signatures from our PIN pads? The iPads are internet capable. They didn't make special iPads without internet capabilities. The iPads actually communicate to each other in the front of the precinct. It's supposed to be for check-in purposes only. That's all we used it for. They don't speak to the machines in the back. They only speak to each other. But if we're being transparent, then it would be a mistake to say that we have nothing in the building with internet capability, because that's not true. The iPads do have the internet capability, but those are only supposed to store the information of the voters. So it's like a supplemental registry. It just keeps a log of everybody in the precinct so that whenever they check in, you can take them out of the roll. It's to ensure no double voting. So where the old school, you used to cross them off a list, the computer now does that for you. So this is some misconception as to, how much access did the voting machines give to the general public? Were they hackable in real time? Is that information being stored on those hard drives? And with the scanner box, another thought came up to me is once we collect those particular votes on the memory cards, what type of card or what type of machine are we sticking that memory card into in order to tally the votes? So when it comes down to the process of, auditing these machines and how much vulnerability do they have, I was very interested to get an answer on that, because where I don't believe that the machines can be manipulated in real time from the precincts, you have computer mechanisms and parts that are parts of these machines that are being uploaded and counted and kind of collected in third-party areas. Now, if and we'll go into this later. If anybody watched the hearings yesterday, we heard a lot of people talk about there were video cameras and there were poll watchers and there were people here and there were people there watching this process all go down, and they're maintaining that this is the most free and fair and transparent election of our time. But we still are not seeing answers to the specific questions that we've asked. Okay, so, we could throw out the notion, and I even said it through the 4 years of the Russia collusion. I'm sorry, you have not given me any reason to believe that foreign interference has happened or occurred here. The only people that are shown to have access to our ballots are people in the polling locations, but that's where the problem comes up. And I also said this to my poll manager. I said, again, if we are talking about poll workers that are co-workers, and think about it, especially in this day and age, when you're working with somebody, maybe you don't always get along, maybe you don't always see eye to eye, but how far are you really willing to go in order to make somebody's life difficult, or cast doubt on their integrity? Or what would possess a person other than the passion for the truth to accuse a coworker or somebody else on the same level as they are of inappropriate behavior, fraud, or just kind of general illegality? What would possess a person to do that other than, like I said, the pursuit of truth? You have a lot of poll workers who had come out and said there were aspects that they were not privy to. There were policies and procedures that were happening that when they questioned, they got backlash from. There were things happening that, even if it was just a simple, hey, this is procedure and you just need to be retrained or you just need to be educated on the system, there were things happening that people raised their hand and they stood up and they said, hey, I don't think that this is right, and I would like for you to explain it to me. And instead of somebody coming down and saying, well, here's the proper procedure and this is what they did and this is point A to point B to point C to the end, they didn't say that. They called them names. They told them that their lawsuits were frivolous. They told them that they didn't have any standing. And a lot of these cases weren't even really seen in a courtroom. Yes, the judge looked over the preliminary evidence and what was submitted to the court. I heard a lot yesterday of Democratic senators telling American citizens that there was no allegations of fraud. Fraud is a strong word. When you use fraud, and this is what really irritates me about this situation, but when you use the word fraud, you are insinuating they're doing things that are unsavory on purpose. They're doing it to justify the ends to the means. So fraud in and of itself has to come with some sort of intent. And when we're talking about intent, and intent to defraud an election process, for an instance. How much is intent and how much is just being uninformed, being misinformed? So here's a for instance. Georgia did an audit on themselves and they came across a ballot that was in question and the signature was off. It didn't match the person that it was supposed to have come from. So they got a hold of the voter, and it turns out that his wife signed off on his absentee ballot for him. Now, was that fraud per se? Technically speaking, I don't think he intended to commit fraud by allowing his wife to sign off on his ballot. He just wasn't thinking. A lot of people don't think about something like that when they're so used to having their spouse or their significant other take care of things for them. But at the end of the day, you can't have somebody else sign your ballot for you. So in that particular instance, it was an easy open and shut case. They went back to the voter. They explained the discrepancy. The gentleman verified his information and his vote, and we went on our merry way. So my question is, why did you have to audit yourself? There's some really shady things to be said about people who will not uncover their actions to a third party or will not expose themselves to somebody outside of the loop or somebody distanced from the situation. I think the biggest issue that we had here in Georgia as far as integrity towards our election goes was the staunch denial of any type of just justification for what they did and the processes that they had. I think that throwing out these court cases was probably the most detrimental and disengaging act I've ever seen in my lifetime in American history, for the simple fact that we weren't asking for an overturning of the election. I wasn't asking for the election to be overturned. I simply wanted clarification and complete transparency. When you listen to the Georgia legislative hearings and these representatives are asking on behalf of their constituents for the Secretary of State and for the election board committee to be transparent in a way that is meaningful. Explain to us why these poll workers are accusing each other of malfeasance. Explain to us how and why you decided to enact a litigation process, not a ruling, not a court ban or mandate or whatever you want to call it. It was a litigation hearing between the elections office and Brad Raffenspringer and the Democratic Party coming into scrutinizing absentee ballot signatures. We heard a lot of people talk about, Republicans voted from home too. They voted from mail as well. And that's true. Absolutely, it's true. But at the end of the day, that's not reflected in the litigation that you guys passed. And let's be crystal clear. We can't get to a point of a fair and free election if we don't all agree to the rules prior to the election. I.e., the same argument came up in all 7 swing states. The executive branch has usurped the power of the legislative branch. This is a big deal. And this goes beyond the Trump-Biden argument. This goes beyond election interference and foreign entities in our government. In my opinion, that's way above and beyond that, because this is the same type of legislation that they're passing for mask mandates, health violations, tickets, businesses being shut down. We had a real big shot here, in my opinion, for proper procedure, and we let it go through the wayside. We didn't have the backing in the courts to say, hey, wait a second, is it right for an executive to make a law? According to our Constitution, both the state and federal Constitution, executive branch has no lawmaking authority. This is how we have had our rights usurped during the entire pandemic, by allowing one small entity or one small branch, not even the proper branch of government, create new law and create new mandates and ways forward. So when you're speaking about why is it so dangerous, why is it so terrible when an executive member takes over the legislative powers of the legislator? Well, think about it. You know, we had such a highly contested election right now, and everybody's talking about the fight between Democrats and Republicans. So here it is. When you're talking about representation in your legislative houses, it's a more accurate representation than just the governor or just the mayor or just the board of elections. The legislative branch is directly representative of the people and the areas that they come from. So when they convene in the House and they set the laws, you can rest assured that your area and your voice was spoken for. It was put into the equation. Your representative spoke for your county or your municipality or whatever you want to, call your conglomerate of area. And when you put the power into the executive branch that we have put into the executive branch, in the past year alone, the executive power has just grown out of control. But when you put that power there, you see now the dangers of usurping these representatives. You see now the dangers of disenfranchisement from the people. And a lot of people had an issue with that. They didn't really care about the machines. They didn't really care about the outcome of the vote. What they wanted to know is how their government, their local governments, could change the rules halfway through the game. What about the people that already voted before these laws and stuff went into change, or went into effect, these mandates or whatever you want to call them, because they're not laws. I do apologize. They're not laws. What do you say to those people? That was a big thing in Pennsylvania with the signature matching. Apparently the scrutiny on the absentee ballots that came through the mail, they didn't really care about those signatures. If they came through the mail, they were good to go. But whenever the people came into the precincts in person, there was a process that they had to have their signature match their driver's license. The mail-in ballot people, did they show their driver's license? Do we know that mail wasn't somehow picked up in between the voter and the precinct? We're also talking about drop-off boxes and, they were watched with cameras. We watched cameras, with drop-off boxes. How hard is it to just, pay somebody off here's $5, go drop that in the mailbox? I could fill out 50, 60 harvested ballots and give them to 50 or 60 different people and have them drop them off at the ballot box. Who's to say that you didn't steal those ballots and then stick them in that drop box? We're trying to say that this chain of command was secure. When we drop our ballots off here in Georgia two people have to ride to the polling location to drop the ballots off. We have multiple pieces of paper that we have to triple sign off on. It's two assistant managers, and the poll manager has to sign off on every piece of paper that comes through our precinct, whether it be for canceling an absentee ballot in person, registering a voter at a new address, provisional ballots. We have all different kinds of things that we have to sign off on. But now you're talking about letting the post office be your chain of custody. You're talking about metal boxes being a chain of custody. Where's my post office signatures? Where are the signatures from the people who picked up the drop boxes? We weren't shown any of those things. We were just told that, don't worry, we audited ourselves and it's okay. See, this is where the problem lies. When you tell people that their concerns aren't worth listening to and you throw them out of court, when you tell people that you've audited yourself and it's good enough, we should trust and believe you, when it's very clear that we don't, that's where we have problems. And that's where I believe we can segue into what happened yesterday and how we got to the point that we have gotten to with the chaos that erupted in DC. Now, with all that being said, I would like to say that I do not condone violence of any kind for anything unless that violence is enacted upon you and you are protecting yourself, protecting your family, protecting your property, protecting your business. With that being said, I personally cannot attest to any violence. The only violence that I witnessed yesterday came at the hands of the DC police officers. We back the blue as conservatives, as Republicans, as law-abiding American citizens. But I am very, very disheartened, very sad, very shocked to see an unarmed woman shot dead for trespassing on a government building of the people. This wasn't an FBI Secret Service operation. This wasn't the halls of the White House, even though the people do own more rights to the White House. The White House should always be accessible to the public. That's our house. We do own that house. We should not be disrespectful, should not be tearing things up, shouldn't be looting, shouldn't be taking things, shouldn't be burning things, shouldn't be breaking windows. Absolutely not. I don't agree with that. But I do agree with a show of force. And not a force in a way where you overtake or you overrun or you pin down other people. That's not the show of force that we're talking about. We're talking about a show of patriotism, a show of you're not going to silence us, a show of we stand united. We show the force of unity because that's what the founding fathers said we should do. And if we don't, they said that we would fall. Divided, we fall. So when we have these patriots, these mostly, and I say that in the truest sense of the word, these mostly peaceful protests, and then you listen to your senators, your House of Representatives condemn you, call you terrorists, claim that you are un-American and that you don't care about the country, how are you supposed to react? When I saw patriots on the Capitol stairs, I was proud. That's what they should be doing. They should be standing there. They should have their voices heard. They weren't on private property. They weren't looting businesses. They weren't hurting each other. They weren't burning things down. They were talking to officers. Yes, there were some people there who were not very nice people. They said some pretty nasty things. But there were also patriots there. And I saw them. They stepped in the way of as much violence as they could. They stopped when the officers told them to stop. When the FBI tactical team hit the ground, 2 minutes it took them to throw flashbangs into the crowd. And people dispersed. Within 5 minutes, they had tear gas into the crowd. People dispersed. They were able to line up in riot fashion and push the crowd back to an acceptable perimeter. And shortly thereafter, the curfew went into effect. And by 8 o'clock, the streets were completely empty. Nothing was destroyed. There weren't bodies in the streets. The crowd left. And Congress was able to go back to session. But the words I heard come from their mouths about the people that they're supposed to be representing, and the people that they made promises to. And I'm not talking about the false promises, like campaign promises. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm simply talking about the promise that they have to be unbiased and to work in the best interest of every American, whether that American is angry or that American is content with what's happening. We still have the right to be explained and to be heard and to be understood. It may not seem like much to you, but it means everything to the Republic. You know, because we listened, and I've listened. I've listened, guys. I've heard you. You said that the system left you out. And we said that it wouldn't, and it didn't. We just all had to follow the same rules. And here we are. There's not the same rules. Patriots are upset today, not because their candidate lost, because they're being told they're not American. They're being told that the actions that they took were worse than attempting to secede from the Union. Their efforts to be heard are being called an insurrection. Was Chaz called an insurrection? When you look at the actions of these people, they went straight to who they had their grievances with. They didn't take it out on their community. They didn't take it out on their neighbors. They didn't take it out on each other. They didn't take it out on a group of people. They went straight to the source. That's a redress of grievances, whether you agree with their grievances or not. We don't have to agree. And I think there were many Republicans yesterday who said the right thing. And they said this all could have been avoided. All of this could have been avoided if you would have sat down, taken the time to cross-examine your accusers, bring evidence into the courtroom, and give the people their day in court. There are people who believe that in order to gain equality, they have to be given an advantage. I don't understand that. I don't think I ever will. The words in the Constitution didn't change. They meant the same thing they've always meant. We changed the interpretation of the documents. But our founding fathers had a lot of the arguments that we're rehashing today. They gave us a cheat sheet that we refuse to follow, and then wonder why we continue to fail the test. If we're not using the answers that are given to us, we'll continue to fail the test. And you may not agree with what those patriots did yesterday, and I'm not saying that every patriot that was there caused no harm. Because I'm sure, just as I've said many times before, anybody is capable of violence. Anybody is capable of committing crimes. You're not predispositioned to commit a crime or predispositioned not to commit a crime. I don't condone those actions. I can't say that I saw any of that personally myself. But to anybody who did, it was wrong. It was wrong. And that's not the way to get your point across. But to the other 99%, thank you for what you did. I can say thank you to the patriots that stood for their cause and put their money where their mouth is to show up. And when our brothers and sisters need us, we will stand next to them. Because no matter what, we still love our country. We're still proud of our people. And we still believe that we, the people, make America great.